Now we have, for our commencement speaker this year, a very fine gentleman I've known for some time. I've considered it a blessing from God to have known him and to continue to cherish him as a very dear friend. A member of our parish, our family, Mr. Daniel Gentry. Dan hails from North Alabama, where he graduated from Fort Payne High School in 2001. He attended the United States Military Academy in West Point, where he graduated in 2005 with a degree in civil engineering. He was commissioned an officer in the Army Corps of Engineers, where he served 5 years on active duty, including a 15-month combat tour in Iraq. After leaving active duty, he moved to Cincinnati, where he has worked for Procter & Gamble, Perfetti Bandemi, and more recently, in his own company. So Dan is an entrepreneur. He and his wife Sarah are parishioners at Immaculate Conception Academy. Sarah, lifelong parishioner. Dan is a convert to our faith. And as you know, converts come with a certain zeal, which often puts us cradle Catholics to shame. And in Dan's case, I see that zeal and I find it very inspiring. Dan and Sarah are now expecting their 7th child later this year. So it is with great joy and gratitude that I welcome Daniel Gentry to address you, our graduates, this year.
Father Jenkins, Mr. Harrison, all of our faculty and staff, our parents, and to our new high school and 8th grade graduates, thank you for the honor of addressing you today. I want to speak first to the 8th grade graduates. Congratulations. These years, you've learned how to learn. You now have a strong foundation, and the next 4 are going to prepare you to go out into the world. In some ways, it's going to be like packing a giant, invisible suitcase with everything you're going to need along the way, or at least the things to get you to where you can get more. And I still remember when I was in the 8th grade, and my advice to you, like others have said, don't try to rush it. Give it all you've got and enjoy it. Enjoy it and make the most. Dedicate yourself and give it all you've got. Now to our high school graduates, your suitcase is packed. Congratulations. You've been given all you need to be ready for your future. Today we celebrate the commencement, the beginning. And it is a beginning of many beginnings, that each one brings new opportunity, and with that comes new choices. Up to now, your schedule, your classes, your learning plan, these things have been dictated to you, but from now on you will be more and more free to decide. But incidentally, you'll never be entirely free to decide. But you're going to be more and more and more free to decide. And don't be surprised if it gets confusing sometimes, because the world itself is totally confused. Remember that. Wherever you go, expect to hear a lot about one word: values. That word is going to be rolled out, emblazoned, paraded around, and beaten to death in every company communication, every college syllabus, every morning talk show, and even at maybe some restaurants that you go into and you see. And I detest that word. And the best explanation why is to tell you the words that it was designed to replace and that it has replaced. Truth, principles, morality, right and wrong. Those are words that you've been taught. But Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, invented this word values in the 1960s precisely to replace those words. And he's largely succeeded. He believed and convinced many others to believe that there is no right and wrong, really. That even your life itself is objectively worthless and meaningless. Boy, that sounds pretty inspirational and hopeful, doesn't it? But instead he taught that we're going to each invent those things ourselves, and that they exist only according to what you personally value. Is that word values finally coming into focus now? Of course, that value can change from situation to situation, or from hour to hour, a moment to moment, just like a stock value on the Wall Street ticker tape. No wonder this confusion. The word has been adopted, but worse than that, his philosophy has been adopted. And the word, for all its lip service to openness, Damien, like you mentioned, has no shortage of derogatory labels, ready to apply to anyone who disagrees with their philosophy. So maybe we can, or I'll take it upon myself to make up a word of my own to describe them. Labelists, or Ellists for short. Ignore the Ellists. Just ignore them. Instead, choose today for yourself the answer to a question that is going to be in everyone's mind the moment that they meet you for the rest of your lives. It's the same question that the apostles asked about our Lord after he calmed the raging storm that was sinking their boat. What manner of man is this? What kind of person are you? I do not mean you have to know today what's your vocation, nor your career path. That will come in time. These years at ICA have prepared you to achieve in whatever calling or profession lies before you. Religious or layman, doctors, lawyers, soldiers, statesmen, fine craftsmen of all kinds. There's no trade, virtually no trade, vocation, or profession in which you cannot find a successful ICA graduate. You have the knowledge to achieve, but more than that, you have the foundation to find true and lasting success. So let's talk about success. I'm going to introduce you to another person from the class of 24, but a different class of 24. 100 years ago, almost to this exact day and hour, a young man was sitting in his graduation robe, as you are now, at a high school commencement on the other side of the country. I have to do this. This will be a little bit tricky because of the stage. But this, to make it more real, this is his watch. When this watch was made in 1927, our young man was already looking toward his graduation from a very prestigious university, where he'd quickly risen to prominence academically and socially because he had such great abilities, but he was incredibly charismatic and super intelligent. Now, we can learn something of those abilities from this watch itself. He might have bought it, but it cost $250. $250, what's that? Well, an inflation calculator will tell you that equates to about $5,000 today. But another way to look at that is you could buy an ounce of solid gold for $20.67 in 1927. Today, as of yesterday's market close, that same ounce of gold cost $2,338.50. So from that perspective, $250 then represents more than $28,000 of purchasing power today. Either way, it was not something that any college student could afford. Instead, he won it in a national drawing contest. Out of tens of thousands of entries, the judges, who included James Montgomery Flagg, now you may not know the name, but you probably know Uncle Sam, the cartoon character that he invented. So James Montgomery Flagg was one of the judges. And they, out of tens of thousands of entries, they chose our young man's drawing for this prize. That drawing also got him his first job. He left college, got his first job, was quickly promoted. He married, started a family. His creative and artistic abilities launched his career from success to success. And although his career was not without troubles, no life was without troubles, he amassed a huge list of accolades in his lifetime. He became editor of multiple national magazines. His friends included leaders and celebrities, including household names like Charles Lindbergh, the aviator. By 1960, he had retired early, and from then on, he could be found on tropical islands or on the coast. He also wrote several books that were published on subjects ranging from travel to Christian doctrine. But along the way, he lost his family. Don't get me wrong, they all live very full lives and are living them. But the family splintered. After he died, this watch, which was for him a treasured keepsake his entire life because it reminded him of his success, it became only what it is to you and to me, only what it has always been in itself. Just a thing. A shiny thing, maybe, but just a thing. I understand from the owner of this watch that the heir who sold it refused to even mention the man's name. Will not mention the man's name. So I too, out of respect for their family, will not mention it now. Instead, I ask you to judge the success. Judge success. Instead, I'll read you a list of names, captains of U.S. industry and men at the pinnacle of their profession 100 years ago, and that the maker of this watch used to advertise it when it came out. If anyone in the room recognizes the names we go through, and I do think you will recognize a few, I hope. But if anyone recognizes a name and knows what that person did, please just briefly give a raise of your hand, and I'll see you as we go through. Don't worry, I'm not going to call them. But let's give me a wave if you recognize a name. Lincoln C. Andrews, W.S. Benson, E.G. Burkham, Oscar Carlstrom, James Cox, J.B. Graham, Samuel J. Harris, Charles Lindbergh, Joseph W. Martin Jr., Charles W. Nash, John J. Pershing, Charles Fuller Stoddard, and H.A. Walsh. All right, well, I knew there would be some we'd recognize, and I was very happy to see that the Army generals carried the day over the Navy admirals. So, as an ex-Army guy, thank you very much for that. Sorry to my father-in-law who is not here, but I will just mention that the Air Force is not old enough to even be considered in running for this war. So the Army wins it, but most of them are unknown to us. Their professional accolades are forgotten. But now I happen to know that at least a few of those men on these lists, in this ad and in others from that company, would not mind it one bit. They don't mind that they've been forgotten, even though they provided income for thousands of families. Because their greatest accomplishment, their greatest success, was not at their factory or at a government building, but at their home and in their family. If those men could be here to speak to you today, they would tell you, probably in better words than I can give you, they would tell you that any mother and father who could raise up virtuous, devout, and hardworking children have achieved the more difficult, more lasting, and more important success, just as you know. And they would give credit for this to our mothers. They knew the truth behind the poem, "The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world." 100 years later, we've seen what happens when that hand goes away. The whole world rocks. But I'll digress. So I'll leave you with one last brief story. I took you back 100 years ago to meet a young man in the class of 24. This is a story about another young man who was 18 years old on that graduation across the ocean from us. Both of these men were born and died within 1 year of each other. So he was 18 years old in 1924 in France. He didn't go with his friends to any of the prestigious French universities. And in 1927, when the watch was made, there were no art contests nor fraternity pins for him. He was just ending multiple years of mandatory military service that he'd been conscripted into, which is to delay his plans and his studies. He never married. He never had a family. But in 1929, when he finished his undergraduate studies, he did not put on a business suit and head to Wall Street. He put on a Roman collar and a cassock. Yes, this young man had become a priest. And after a few years' work and preparation, he went to Africa. By 1960, he had labored almost 30 years there. Although he advanced within his order, the world had largely forgotten him. But he was nowhere near retiring, even though I'm sure he was tired. And even his greatest trials were yet to come, following Vatican II. So, as you've probably already guessed, I'm referring to Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. He would go on to found the traditional seminary at Freiburg and Econ at the Society of St. Pius X, and whose work was so important to preserving the traditional Latin Mass. And many confirmations of our older generation, they remember him well because he confirmed them. Although he died in 1991, you know many of those who received their confirmations from his hands. And his hands are still very much at work among us and around the world through the many holy priests he formed and ordained right here. So I will add at the end, it's great to have your name carved in stone, but it's better to write your legacy in hearts and souls of your friends, of your family and neighbors, of your own, where the rain will not wash it away nor time erode the memory. So what manner of man are you? What type of success will you value most? For where thy treasure is, there is thy heart also. Thank you. God bless you.